Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is ExtremeDJ48, and thanks for dropping in. Today, we have a very special video. I've been working on this for a little while, and I'm very excited to introduce to you guys my very own homebrew Space Marine chapter. And with that, I have a couple of these planned. I have a couple in progress, but we are going to focus on my completed one, which is the Steel Falcons. So let's quite literally dive right into it. Alright, Gene Father, Jagatai Khan, and of course this means they are a chapter of the White Scar Legion. So Loyalist, chapter motto. Their chapter motto is Strike from on High. This is a motto that very much fits the White Scar way of combat. So for those of you who played the tabletop or know in the lore, this is a lot of attack bikes, a lot of land speeders, and attack ships. Very hit hard, hit fast. So if you are playing Space Marine 2, the classes that you will want to focus on customizing are the Assault and Vanguard. These are the very good attack specific targets or cause very, very hard, devastating strikes and then get out. So I will turn it over to myself in game, and I will show you guys what exactly to do in order to kind of cosplay in Space Marine 2 the Steel Falcons. So, Extreme, can you take over? Alright, thank you, Extreme. Yes, I will take over. Alright guys, I am now here in game, and I will show you guys how to cosplay the Steel Falcons. Alright, so, and look at that, the game's starting to crap out on me, better get this done quick. Alright, so, first things first guys, you will want a solid paint pattern, not the corded or the halved, just the solid paint pattern. For the primary color, you will want the White Scar, with the secondary being blue, with the Mephiston red tertiary color. Alright, all the cosmetic changes that you have for the armor come entirely up to you guys, depending on your progression. And if you have any of the cosmetics that block any of this, that's fine. It's just the colors that we are really concerned about. Alright, so for the helm, you will want the solid paint pattern with the White Scar main color, the blue secondary color, which doesn't really appear, the Mephiston red tertiary color, and for the lenses, you will want the Evil Sun's Scarlet. Now, moving over to the backpack, you again will want the solid pattern, this time with blue as the main color, as it kind of stands out from the rest of the torso. I think it looks very cool. Also, the gold very much embellishes it. And speaking of which, you will want the gold tertiary color. Again, because all of the decorations on the pack very much complement the color, in my opinion. So moving over to the left pauldron, you will want, again, the base pattern as with the rest of the armor. And you will want the White Scar main color, the Mephiston red tertiary color, again for the metal, and then for the emblem, you want the unchanged default White Scar's icon decal. This obviously paying homage to the White Scars, whom the Steel Falcons hail from, as they are a chapter of the White Scars. So moving over to the right pauldron is where things get different. Alright, so again, regular solid pattern. You will want the blue main color with, again, Mephiston red as the tertiary. But instead of the White Scar icon, you will want the Raven Guard icon with its color changed to the Iron Hands Steel decal color. I think it gives the Raven on it a very metallic look, and it also very much complements the blue. So now moving down to the right gauntlet, you will want, for the fist portion, the White Scar main color, and then you will want blue for the rest of the arm, going from the shoulder down to the wrist. Alright, so now moving down to the greaves, for the left greave, you will want the solid paint pattern with blue, again, going down the entire leg, with gold tertiary color for all of the embellishments in the armor. Now, for the emblems, you don't have to have them. They are just the way that I wanted it to be. Again, it is entirely up to you, but if you're looking to do an exact one on one version of what I have, this is what you want to do. So for the left greave, you will want the Watch Company Cortis marking decal. I'm fairly certain that there are others, but you will want the one... Nah, so the Quintus, you will want the Cortis decal with the White Scar color as the background, and then as the stripe, you will want the Mephiston red. Kind of ties into the main colors of the armor. Now for the right greave, you are going to want the Greaves pattern, not the weird flame one that you would see for like a salamander build, and not the solid one. You will just want the Greaves pattern. So for it, you will want the main color to be, again, White Scar, as usual, for the thigh portion, and then you will want blue from the knee down, with, of course, the gold tertiary color, again, for the embellishments, with no emblem. So you will want the Watch Company Cortis for the left greave, and no emblem for the right. Anyway, guys, that is how you make the Steel Falcons. Of course, this is my assault class. I have not really played the Vanguard class, so you can see he has all of the default armor, none of the upgraded stuff from operations or the multiplayer. The assault I chose because it's probably my second most decorated after my tactical, which will come in a different video, as that is a entirely different chapter that I am, as of right now, in the process of writing. But anyway, guys, that is it. So I will now turn it back over to, once again, myself, as we now cover the backstory and all of the other nitty little facts about the Steel Falcons. So, Extreme 1, do you want to take back over? Alright, thank you, Extreme 2, for that lovely demonstration. Again, if you guys want to go and create the Steel Falcons in-game, you are free to pause, go back, and resume once you have completed your cosplay. Alright, now let's get into the real nitty-gritty of the Steel Falcon chapter. Alright, so, obviously their gene seed and their gene father is of Jagatai Khan, and they are a chapter of the White Scar Legion, as mentioned before. With their homeworld on Mundus Planus, or Kugaras. I'm pretty sure I butchered that name, but that is the homeworld of Jagatai Khan and of the White Scars. And while it is their homeworld, they aren't actually seen too often there. In fact, they're not really seen too often everywhere, because the Steel Falcons are actually a very nomadic, similar to how the actual Mongols in history were a very nomadic people on the Mongolian steppes. Alright, so, what is their method of war? So the method of war for the Steel Falcons is very much the basic White Scar attitude of, you gotta go fast, you gotta hit hard, you gotta hit fast, and you gotta get out just as quickly. This often involves a lot of attack bikes, land speeders, a lot of very fast-moving, very fierce melee combat. Alright, so they do, unfortunately, have the same weakness as the White Scars, in that they are not really good at long-winded and grueling sieges. They prefer very fast, very fierce fighting, and then, again, it very much ends just as quickly as it starts. Alright, and they also very much enjoy acting as a Vanguard, not a Space Marine 2 Vanguard class, calm down. They are sent to the bloodiest areas where enemy resistance is at an all-time high, basically to soften up and try to relieve any pressure or try to make any kind of breakthrough. They also tend to not stay very long in the areas that they are in. They essentially act like quite literally, a equivalent of an Astra Militarum calling in an airstrike, except this is obviously a Space Marine airstrike. They go in, they hit hard, and they are gone faster than you can really see them.
Alright, back up, Sam. You're gonna get your wings singed.
Alright, so, personalities and beliefs. What does the Steel Falcon believe? What does the chapter believe in? Alright, So the chapter itself is very, very steeped in tradition and lore of Old Terra. They actually believe that the Emperor of Mankind was the real reincarnation of Genghis Khan, one of the greatest conquerors in the history of Old Terra during the time before the Imperium of Man during the Dark Age of technology. In an ancient legend, Genghis was known for his skill in the art of falconry. The chapter believes that Jagatai Khan, their primarch, is actually the reincarnation of a bird of prey that once gave its life to save Genghis Khan from a poisoned water supply from the body of a decomposing snake. And so, obviously, during the time of the Great Crusade, when the chapter wasn't around, but members of its Brotherhood were, when the Imperium and thus the White Scars found their Primarch Jagatai Khan on Mundus Planus, they believed that it was kind of a sign that their beliefs were correct. They believed that Jagatai Khan is actually the reincarnation of the Bird of Prey that saved Genghis Khan, and that, of course, the Emperor was the reincarnation of Genghis Khan, and thus they saw that their beliefs were justified and correct. Alright. So, it isn't until the second founding that the Steel Falcons actually come into existence. So during the second founding, following the Horus Heresy, is when obviously we see the more modern Space Marines that we see, where it's 1,000 Space Marines into separate chapters of different legions. They are, of course, a chapter of the White Scar Legion and name themselves the Steel Eagles, as they see themselves as pretty much the birds of prey, the wings of the Emperor, the talons of humanity. Alright, so it isn't until the time. So obviously the second founding happens and they start doing what they obviously do, which is fight the enemies of mankind. But it isn't until a little while later, a couple of centuries actually, until things really begin to change and they start to branch off from your basic White Scars and become the Steel Falcons that we know them as today. So during that point in time, they were patrolling around Mundus Planus, and during this time, because they are the White Scars, they often, again, prefer very fast, very wild combat, and this very much puts them at odds with pretty much the vast majority, if not the entirety, of the Eldar, because the Eldar, as we all know, while their population is still small, and they are slowly, as of the current lore, kind of replenishing their numbers, it is a very, very slow and grueling process. And because of this, the Eldar way of combat is very much fast-paced, very wild, unpredictable, a lot of deception on the battlefield. And because they are the Whites, and because the Steel Falcons are the White Scars, they often come into contact. They are essentially the Eldar version of Space Marines. So, at least in terms of their fighting style. Not at all, because that would be heretical. Alright, so what happens is that while they were patrolling outside the Mundus Planus, they came into contact with a Eldar craft world. They decided they got into combat, of course, and as the combat ended, they decided to go after the Eldar craft world. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is that as they are trying to chase it, the Eldar craft world goes into the webway, the Eldar's version of interstellar travel, different from going through the warp, a little bit safer, but they're still pretty much doomed to go to Slaanesh. Speaking of which, so as the Eldar ship is getting away, the flagship of the chapter, the Divine Falcon, as it is called, tried turning around and getting out of the way, but unfortunately it was too late, and the flagship, the Divine Falcon, and the entire chapter was dragged right into the webway. That's right. This is a Space Marine Legion during the second founding that was trapped and was stranded in the middle of the webway. Now, if you know anything about warp traveling in 40k, it's essentially riding on a surfboard through hell, and you can very easily die. However, the Divine Falcon held firm and did not get destroyed and did not kill all the Space Marines. They all survived, but were now stuck in the webway for who knows how many centuries. So, this became known as the event known as the Great Hunt, as it were, as with nowhere else to go. The Divine Falcon continued to pursue and hunt down the Eldar craft world and any other threats that they came into contact with during this time while they were trapped in the webway. This put them at odds with a very particular group of Slaanesh demons. Now, unfortunately, during this time, a group of the Steel Falcons ended up being persuaded to join Slaanesh, as of course not all Space Marines are immune to the powers of the influence of the Chaos Gods. So, let me check my notes. These Space Marines, these traitors, branded themselves as the Nova Phoenixes, as themselves to be basically the Redemptors, believing that the rest of the chapter had forsaken their way of combat and that they just were not going fast enough. And Slaanesh promised them the power to go faster than anyone in the history of the galaxy ever could. And this turns a good portion of the Steel Falcons into siding with the heretic Astartes, creating, of course, the Nova Phoenixes, who swore to Slaanesh, and obviously Slaanesh lied. They believed that they would be going as fast as possible, but in reality, all that was done to them was once they got into the warp after they were all killed, they were essentially pumped full of adrenaline drugs. Chaotic adrenaline drugs that makes them think that they're going faster than they can even comprehend, when in reality they're just basically turning into mindless, speed-seeking monstrosities of the warp. Alright, so obviously this splits up the chapter, but then eventually, after who knows how many centuries in the webway, finally the Mundus Planus the Divine Falcon flagship would appear in the 41st millennium after being shot out of the webway back into the solar system. And it is here that the modern Steel Falcons that we see now currently call their present day. Alright, so we've gone over the personalities and the backstories. How do they view humanity? Well, it's sort of similar to the rest. You see, the way that the Steel Falcons treat humanity is that they believe that humanity should be protected, as they are both the past and the future of the of humanity's culture, and because the Steel Falcons believe so much in the history of Terra and the history of mankind, they believe that in order to preserve that history, to preserve that knowledge, they must protect humanity. They still believe, however, they still, like all Space Marines, believe themselves to be higher than mankind, and thus demand that all humans show the same respect to them as they would to any other Space Marine. There are a couple instances of very bad things happening to humans who did not show the same respect to the Steel Falcons. It was not a good time for them in particular, but for everybody else, they were fine. They often tend to value the human lives above their own when it's convenient for, obviously, the history of mankind. This very much goes into a lot of Adeptus Mechanicus, although they do have a bit of a attitude when it comes to the Adeptus Mechanicus, as the Adeptus Mechanicus has to the Steel Falcons. Allies. Alright, who are the allies of the Steel Falcons? They don't really have them, to be completely honest. The Space Wolves, Dark Angels, and Ultramarines earn the respect from the Steel Falcons only because the Falcons see them as other legions or chapters who are based on historical references, with obviously the Space Wolves furries. Just kidding. Being the Vikings of 40k, the Dark Angels being the Holy Knights, and of course the Ultramarines being the Romans. But while the Steel Falcons have an appreciation for the Space Wolves, the Dark Elves, and the Ultramarines, They kind of just see them as their cousins, just like any other Space Marine would. Alright, so the arch nemesis, the arch enemy of the Steel Falcons we already covered was the Nova Phoenixes, the heretic Astartes from the Steel Falcons that betrayed them and turned to Slaanesh for the promise of greater speed, only to be induced with a bunch of drugs that makes them think they're going faster, but really they're just as fast as their Steel Falcons cousins. But again, they've been corrupted, so now they are stuck in the warp. Alright, so what is the chapter's stance on the Codex Astartes by Roberte Gilliman? If that's how you pronounce his name, I don't know, I've seen a million ways. Similar to how Dimitri and Titus in Space Marine 2 story mode, how he believes that the Codex can be bent, but also can be followed. Similarly, the Steel Falcons believe that you can follow the Codex when it's convenient for you, and you can disregard it just as easily. They don't really play too much by the book, again, because of their Eldar-inspired way of combat. They often do stuff that is against what the Codex Astartes says. But they could really care less. They only really care about it when it's convenient for them, and when the Codex doesn't really help them out with anything, that is when they just toss it aside and say, you know what, we're just going to do our own thing. So the current chapter master, or as the title I've put, the Horde Captain, is, and please forgive me, I'm going to absolutely butcher this name, Batuhan Yamiyansuren. I'm pretty sure I butchered that name. I'm terribly sorry. It's a Mongolian name that I came up using Google Translate, and obviously it doesn't do the audio for it, so I'm pretty sure I butchered that name, but so we're just going to refer to him as Baduhan. So Baduhan has served as Horde Captain pretty much since the chapter's founding. At the age of 454, he's a little bit older. He's on the older side for a Space Marine. And he has led the chapter since its creation during the initial centuries after the second founding in the 31st millennia. However, this was, of course, until they disappeared into the webway. And as we all know, and for those of you who don't know, when you're traveling in the warp or the webway, time itself changes. It's kind of like similar to what happens in Avengers Endgame, where Ant-Man goes into the quantum realm. Time functions differently in the quantum realm than the way it functions in the real world. Similarly, the warp and the webway, time functions differently. Time passes by at a different speed than it does in the main reality. So what ends up happening, of course, is that for the Steel Falcons, it's only like maybe 100 years stuck in the webway. Whereas in reality, when they come back, they are now in the 41st millennium in the present day. So almost a full millennia has passed since they disappeared, which is why there's not much information about them in the archives of Terra. So Bazuhan served during the second founding, served as the chapter master or the horde captain while they were in the webway in their long hunt, which was when they were they were stuck in the webway. And then, even to this day, he still holds the position of Horde Captain. And though he is, by all accounts, far from his youth, he's definitely on the older side for a Space Marine. 454 years is definitely a long time for an Astartes to be alive. He's not as old as, any of, the major players, Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves, who I believe was alive during the Great Crusade and is currently in a dreadnought. But he's definitely on the older side. Despite this, he is still well respected as very wise and renowned for his tactical brilliance. After all, he was the one who led the chapter through the long hunt. He was there every step of the way, and when all was said and done, he is the leader of the chapter, and he is the face of their brotherhood. He's also a great warrior in his own right. Of course, he is slightly aged, so that does take a little bit of a toll on Astartes, but not too much. But he still seldom engages in fights personally, preferring to stay back and strategize and do any kind of commands from, obviously, the bridge of the Divine Falcon. There have been instances of him fighting, but really he's just been there if something has gone terribly wrong, which doesn't really happen too often, as, again, the Steel Falcons very much do not stay in one place. They are very nomadic. Speaking of which, they do have other enemies aside from the Nova Marines. You see, while they do fight where they're needed, they mostly fight against, of course, the Eldar factions and the Slaanesh, especially the Nova Phoenixes. However, they also avoid fighting supporters of Khorne and Nurgle, as Khorne is very vicious in melee, who they can kind of go toe-to-toe against, but it's still going to be a very grueling fight even for them. And they especially do stay away from Nurgle's forces because they, as many people know, Nurgle very focused on more of a defensive, more like an iron wall, just kind of like marching through. They are very tanky and thus prefer long, drawn-out battles, which the Steel Falcons are not the best at. Additionally, however, because of their time in the Webway, the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Inquisition think of the chapter as heretical. This is why they are often not seen at a planet for more than a week or so. They are always moving around. Because of this, they have some trouble recruiting people into their neophyte, but they still manage, as they are incredibly elusive. While they do fight for the Emperor and the Imperium, the higher-ups seem to think that that is not what they do. Similar to how in Attack on Titan, how the Survey Corps were kind of seen as expendable and a waste of resources, when reality their discoveries were leading to some of the biggest breakthroughs. And when the time finally came, the government decided to eliminate the Scout Regiment because they started to learn too much about the outside world, which the government had. So that is a kind of like my inspiration for that relationship between the Steel Falcons and the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Inquisition. So, what are their major campaigns and achievements? As of right now, of the current writing, there is really only one, that being the Long Hunt, which, again, for them, for the chapter, was almost a full century of fighting stranded in the Webway against Slaanesh demons, against the Nova Phoenixes, against the Eldar, the Drukhari, and all other Eldar races, which, of course, affected their way of combat, which they still utilize, which is why the Adeptus Mechanicus and Inquisition see them as heretical, because they use Xenos strategies. Even though it does help them out, it is still taking influence from a non-human race. And of course, that was while they were in the Webway, and then until they are returned to the 41st millennium, which we present day are in. Anyway, guys, that is officially it. That is my personal Space Marine chapter, the first one, the Steel Falcons, guys. This was a utter blast making. I had a really fun time thinking of all the lore and all of the things about the chapter. Of course, I might update a few things. I might make another video kind of like giving you guys like a modern update of like, what are the Steel Falcons doing? Has anything changed? Are new heroes and names in the chapter coming up? But that will come at a later video. This is just a solid introduction to the Steel Falcons, what they are about, what they were inspired by. A lot of their beliefs or their personalities I kind of draw from my own experiences, but I kind of try to take a broad range of topics and kind of mold it into this one very entertaining chapter for me to create. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this content, if you guys want to see more, if you want to see any of my other creations that I'm currently working on, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell to get notified of my latest videos, and be sure, guys, link, as always, down below, join the Discord, guys. We are steadily growing, the channel's steadily growing, the Discord is steadily growing, and we are on our way, and we are very, very close to 50 subscribers. I am really looking forward to what the future of this channel and this content in particular brings, as I am just really getting into the nitty-gritty of Warhammer 40k, and I'm very excited for what's to come next. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.